Welcome to Men's Anonymous, the podcast where men can be vulnerable and open without fear of judgment. Your host, Daniel Weinberg, leads authentic and unfiltered discussions that explore the challenges and triumphs of modern manhood. Join us as we break down barriers, challenge stereotypes, and redefine masculinity. Men's Anonymous, a safe space for men to lower their shields and share their inner world without judgment.
Hi, on this week's episode of Men's Anonymous, we have a very personal conversation with my very good friend, Deep Steve, where we reflect on a terrible time in my life and how he was there for me as a very good friend. I bring you Men's Anonymous.
Deep Steve, welcome to the show. How are you?
Thank you for having me. It's an honor to be on your show.
It's an honor to have you. Where are you right now? Where in the world are you
I
right
am
now?
in a place called Plettenberg Bay, sunny South Africa. It is a holiday place where most people have their holiday homes, and it's one of those tranquil, just magical places where you get to, connect with your family and just shut out the rest of the world and just to you. Amazing, beautiful place. Love you to see it at some point.
I'd love to get there. So we've had a quite a long history. And on today's show, what I really want to focus on is what I would describe as most probably one of the worst points in my life. And I want to talk about what it's obviously it's a very personal discussion, both for me and for you. And what I want to talk about is, and maybe give the audience some color around how it was to experience me in such a low state and how it affected you as a close friend. And from my perspective, I'm forever grateful to you for being there for me at that time and giving me some of the tools and some of the pearls of wisdom that helped contribute to me getting myself out of that mess. So before we dive in, I just want to give a little bit of background. We met each other circa, I would like to think around 2004, 5, something like that, perhaps. When did you move
That's
to
right.
Australia?
That's right.
You're from South Africa originally. When did you move to Australia?
That's about right. I'm originally from Johannesburg, and I had been living in New York and Toronto for about 11 or 12 years. And I was ready for my next move to Sydney in around 2004. I'd kind of done my time with the cold weather of Toronto, and there was a point in time where I had to make a move before having kids, whether I wanted to sustain my life in a cold climate or if I could move to a climate that was more preferable. And I made that move in 2004, and I was fortunate enough to meet you towards the beginning of 2004.
Right. So we met each other. I remember the evening we met. We just clicked and then became brothers since then. And we became very close. And so in early 2022, I suffered what would be described as like a nervous breakdown, whereby I, let's say, completely imploded. I had multiple things going on in my life, both at the business side, the relationship side, and I'd say even like physical health side. So it was a bit of a trifecta of, bad things that happened to me. Sort of irrelevant what the causes are rather than the way I responded to it, which is of more relevance, which is effectively broke down fell into a million pieces. I wasn't sleeping. The adrenaline levels were at max, at 24/7, just very on edge, tense. I had the circular chat going on in my head, which I could not stop. It was like unlimited voices and like just that, itty bitty shitty committee, just total crap going on in my head, where I was, I guess in a flight mode, panic mode, just almost an out of body experience. While I was going through that period, if I was to reflect, my original responses in the beginning of that period was a lot of shame. I was feeling a lot of shame. I didn't really want to go out in public. I could barely socialize. I was living away from a lot of my friends who were spread abroad, so it was easier to hide for me. You were living in Australia. I was living in Israel at the time. And so my communication dropped off, and just had a lot of feeling of shame. And when I finally, I guess, started to open up about it, you were one of the first people that I opened up to, and thankfully, because when I started opening up to you, to my absolute benefit and to my benefit, you welcomed me with open arms, extremely non-judgmental, and even more so, I really felt like you understood where I was at, and you also gave me amazing advice and tools that I could use, obviously, that you'd learned yourself. The two key ones that are of significance that I recall very well, because they had such an impact, was you made me go and buy and read the book by Michael Singer called Untethered Soul, which I still have a few pristine copies of, and I actually hand them out. Okay. I give other people that come into my life who are going through very tough periods of their life what I call the Deep Steve Playbook, which is the Michael Singer Untethered Soul. And then you made me sign up to Sam Harris's Waking Up app to get myself into meditation, of which I did. So it became a very, very challenging period in my life, almost became like a singular focused project. So I almost dropped everything, and the project was, how do I recover? How do I rebuild? As if the house literally had been burnt down. How do I do a complete rebuild? And so I'll stop there. That's how I initially experienced what I was going through and my experience with you. We've never really spoken about. So this is like a reflection, or a look back review on that time. We've never really spoken about it, but what is really intriguing to me, and maybe could be helpful to others out there, is when you saw one of your best mates literally at 64 kilos. So I dropped about 12, 15 kilos. So it was pretty emaciated. My energy was zapped. I was most probably unrecognizable. The normal energy that you get from me. I'm a pretty high energy individual. I had no energy. So all of that combined, what I'm curious here, because you didn't see me as well. We were thousands of miles away. I'd love to hear from your perspective in that initial period, if you can recall. How was it to see me in that light, completely broken? How did it make you feel? And how did you deal with it? How did you like manage to manage me? Would be the best way to put it. So, deep.
First time I saw you in your trauma
Mm.
was
You actually came and visited.
correct.
Oh, you were in.
I was meeting you. I was
That's right.
meeting you at a
You
restaurant.
came to town, and I didn't really have much time for you because I was actually like, I was just ashamed to be around people.
Correct. You. We have another close friend. We have a close friend who warned me that things weren't good, but with you, but I had no clue whatsoever the level of it. And he forced you to come to a dinner.
That's right.
You probably wouldn't have come to that dinner.
That's right.
And I felt like I was hyperventilating when I saw you. And there were other people around at the dinner, and I couldn't talk to you in the way I would normally talk to you. The first experience of it, I will never forget it as long as I live. And I was struggling at a very profound level. I could not understand what I was seeing. So let me go back a second to juxtapose the two people. The Daniel Weinberg that I experienced up until that point of you walking into that restaurant, a Japanese restaurant, we had a beautiful table in the corner. It was like a celebration for me of you and Clinton, my two very good friends coming together. You guys were a new friendship, but it was a very warm and loving friendship, and it had accelerated quite quickly. And you guys, so for me, it was a celebration of being together. And the person that I knew of Daniel Weinberg up until that point was the whole. Let me just stop for a second and say that there were two Daniel Weinbergs in my mind. There was the Daniel Weinberg that the world knew, and the Daniel Weinberg that I knew. And what I mean by that is Daniel Weinberg was an extremely successful, very popular, very well liked, always happy, always the center of attention, incredibly personable, just larger than life, and very successful in the material world as well, and in the business world and all those things. But I liked that, but what I really liked was there was more for me. There was a personal connection. There was a way of communicating with me and connecting with me that was different from most of the people in my life, which I loved that connection. There was something more. There was something deeper that Daniel Weinberg had that I loved and enjoyed about being in his company. Was and I would never analyze this ever, but from a selfish perspective, it would be disappointing not if I arrived at a party and he wasn't around. I go looking for him. And that was just how it was. It was kind of like that guy was going to be like that forever, and that's just how it was going to be. And I don't necessarily know what my thinking was in terms of why or how he would always be that, but I probably, from a selfish perspective, just enjoyed that, and it was just something that I was getting for my own personal well-being and for my own enjoyment. And then I walk into this restaurant and I can't catch my breath because this person is emaciated. They are not the human being that I know. The shock is beyond belief. And I am trying to digest what I'm seeing in front of my eyes, but I can't because there's a disconnect. Nothing informs me of it, and nothing can explain to me how this could have happened.
How was I with you?
Blank.
Yeah, I wasn't there.
I kept on trying to touch you. I would touch your hand.
I wasn't there.
Touch your arm.
I was in the room, but
Daniel Weinberg had left the building.
Yeah, I was
Daniel
a walking
Weinberg had left the
zombie.
building, and it's a freak out because you can't believe it. But at the same time, the only thing that informs you in that moment is I've been here, so I know what's going on here. This person is in a loop, and something has occurred for trauma to be at this level, and because I've been there, I can instinctively just know what needs to happen. What needs to happen? There can be no analysis. There can be no discussion. There can only be now. Fuck. We got to make sure that he now doesn't go deeper and doesn't fall more. And he needs to be secured. He needs to be loved up. He needs to be comforted. He needs to but nothing should nothing can happen that can cause any more damage, and then possibly get to the bottom of what has caused this, and then support him and allow him to come through this. But because of my experience of him up until that point, I knew there was unbelievable volumes, rivers of depth that would allow him to do that. But there was no rush, and please God, that process could begin. And I have to say, without getting into all of that process at this point, that the one thing one doesn't know at that point is whether the person will allow you in and whether they will actually be able to be supported and want to. And you used an expression earlier on, you said, I made you do it. You can't make anyone do it. They have to be a willing partner. And that's the one thing about you that most other people don't have, which is was a joy for me, was that when the time came, you were more than fucking willing. You were like, bring it, baby. Bring me when you were willing to start preparing. But that didn't happen quickly. It wasn't an immediate thing. To get in was the defensive position of most in this position is to fend anyone away and not allow them in. And I was not fucking having that. I had COVID. I got COVID a day or two after that dinner. And I made it my last mission at that point to just focus on you. I said to my partner that night when we got back to the hotel room of what I felt for my friend, everything got dropped for me in my world. And I said, something is terribly, terribly wrong. And I need to get to the bottom of this. And until I do, I'm not coming up for air. And she said to me, that's great. You need to do that. And you do what you got to. And I said, if he pushes me away, he pushes me away, but I'm going to go. I'm not going without a fight. And some of the commercial things that you were dealing with at the point in time, you had to be in war mode. So you were in war mode and you were functioning. So you were still functioning, but it wasn't the Daniel that I knew. It was just more, you were in this warlike emergency / mode, which forced you to fight. When actually,
I'd call it like autopilot. I was literally like
autopilot.
I was like lacking.
We did have one
emotion.
We did have one discussion about it where I said to you, there are two aspects to this thing in your recovery. The one is you need to fight right now, like a mad person. And you said to me, why? And I said, because you will regret if you do not. I said, I'm telling you that in your heart, in your mind, and the person that you used to be, and you won't trust me on this, that person will want to have fought. Whether you lose whether you win or lose commercially will be irrelevant. But the one thing about you is you're not a person who gives up. And so you need to do, and you said, well, I don't know if I have it in me. And I said, you do. And you don't have a choice.
Thing on that point, because I think up until that experience, if you were to ask me, if I was to assess myself of how resilient I was, I would have given myself a bit of a C or a D, a C minus. I'd never thought of myself as someone with deep resilience, but post that, my self-reflection differs greatly in that I think once you go through something that's very challenging in life, and everybody does, everybody's going to experience something in their life at some point which is within their world going to be deemed to be the most challenging, very difficult, whatever, however you want to describe it. And I think once you go through those experiences, you realize that in the end, everything will be okay. And then if it's not okay, then it's not the end.
I love that.
So, and what that means really is that you realize no matter how bad things get, everything ends up being okay, really. And it's what you make of it. And then relatively what you also learn is not to react to, when things go wrong. Sometimes you just have to, things go wrong. You have to be accepting of it. But I think one of the things that, one of the things that I can laugh at it now that you were saying to me at the time, which I really struggled with and I didn't see until after, which was, yes, you're going through something very, very challenging in your life. And I know you're devastated and you're very upset, but you reframed it for me and said, listen, you might not see it right now, but this is actually a gift. This is an opportunity. This is an opportunity to how are you going to respond to this? What are you going to do with this? The lessons and what you learn from it. And at the time, I think I wanted to punch you in the face when you
I
try to
remember it.
when you try to convince me of the gift. But
Mm.
when I look back today, you couldn't have been more right. It is a huge gift to go through difficult things in life. Life is about experiences and growth. And I strongly believe unless you go through these very difficult experiences in life, that we don't grow as people. And we're only here for a very, very short visit on Earth. And so when you get to have these lessons or these growth experiences, you actually learn to be, if one can learn to be thankful for them, your life will be a whole lot better. But I want to digress. I want you to talk a little bit about why the Sam Harris podcast and why the Michael Singer Untethered Soul. You talk about your own experiences that you've had in the past, just like everyone, you've had your own challenges in life. Tell me why they were so helpful to you and why you thought they would, why they would be of such great value to me.
Sure, absolutely.
Maybe go a little bit into a little bit of a history and of what you experienced, just to put things in perspective.
Okay. I don't think you can understand another human being's trauma until you've truly had some of your own. That's my experience of it. I'm not a professional in that sense, so I can only, it's like with like. So my trauma occurred when I was car hijacked in South Africa when I was soon after I came out of university. I just started working with my father and my uncle in business, and I'd come home from a night at work going to visit a friend of mine, and 4 guys pulled me over, and before I knew it was what, there were guns in my face, and potential for death was immediate. And they beat the crap out of me, and they intended to kill me, and it never happened. I survived that, and the very next day, my best friend, a very good friend of mine, was shot and killed, and then a girlfriend of mine was shot 3 weeks later. She survived, but the trauma of those 3 weeks was so profound. But I didn't know that I was in trauma, but I was just doing the same things that you spoke about when you came to dinner that night. I was eating, and I was drinking alcohol. I was going out all the time. I was extroverting, but with massive trauma going on the inside. So I would be occurring on the outside as partying, but it was the exact opposite was going on the inside.
Yeah, you were just suppressing everything and trying to numb it with everything else on top of it.
Correct. I was pushing it down and pushing it down, and the more it came up, the more I needed to push it down. The extremes were always occurring, whatever. And then the next extreme was the lack of eating, and then I found running, but I was running not normal. Like I was like Forrest Gump running 1 kilometer a day. I was like running 30, 40K. Nothing was balanced. There was no opportunity to express one's feelings. I did have a brief moment of therapy, but unfortunately, I was bolting from South Africa. I was running from the trauma, and the therapist had said to me, this type of trauma will cause you to go into extreme positions, and you can spot it in someone else. But I never really had the chance to work through it properly. And I only got it. I had a goal, and ended up in Canada. I ended up having a girlfriend break up with me. And I thought the trauma was the girlfriend breaking up with me, but it was at that point that I got into real therapy and the discovery of the real trauma that had occurred, 3-4 years prior to. And watching you walk into that restaurant that night, I knew it was happening again. I was experiencing. I started to become aware of what you were experiencing, and the things that you talk about, the book and the meditation and all these things are a theme of, as you alluded to earlier on, you spoke about everything will be okay. But that's quite an evolved belief system in terms of understanding that things that are external to yourself are truly external to you, and your happiness and your degree of comfort is not based on their work, those things working out. But the thing about, I can talk for myself. Most men, I believe, we grow up from a very young age wanting to be successful in business and achieve things. And often we link our happiness to external relationships and external successes and all these things. And it gets very deeply embedded in us. And I think it takes something, quite an experience as a human being to understand that true happiness and true joy and connection is not about these goals and these things that we believe we need to be. And if we can do something with those expectations and remove those things and find things that are more connected to that are directly related to our true well-being, like meditation and like the things that they refer to in the book, I think it's a new journey, and it's a new, but I have to say, one thing that is required is a belief in trusting your friend or whoever is coming to your aid, and that's the risk. The risk is that you choose not to go down that road. And I have a friend who unfortunately is no longer with us today, who was struggling and suffering and wasn't able to, reach out and connect, open up, and believe and understand that the path forward was one of that there was a potential path of, if he would have been able to get either the professional help or the friend help or something. And that's one thing that you did unbelievably well. You say you wanted to punch me in the face. I remember the moment. I remember, getting in your face and constantly being there. And there were times when obviously I felt resistance and I was fearful that you were going to pull away completely. But I did sense I knew I had a deep feeling inside, the resilience and there was a sense of you, what was needed, and you kept on coming for more. And then I knew this. But I have a different view to you of your resilience. My experience of you prior to you having any drama, I would say you're one of the most resilient human beings I've ever known. And maybe that's not something you have a consciousness about, but there is something about you that is very deep in terms of, I'm fortunate enough to know both your parents. And I would say there is a well of unbelievable emotion that's so magnificent, and it's just caring and loving and kind and decent and empathetic. And this is the A-type personality that wants to succeed in the world, but not just for the sake of other people saying so. There's a deep need for you to achieve things. That's not because, and I think that's part of your success, is it's not about everyone patting you on the back or you thinking, or this idea of getting runs on the board. I think whether the success is determined by financial, whether it's helping others. And I find that you have a massive impact in the world in terms of your help that you provide others with and your connection to people and your achievements. I think they're all part of a similar theme of wanting to impact the world, because deep down you are a kind, caring, empathetic person. And I don't think you're as connected to it as I feel that I have a sense of it.
Appreciate that. I'd say if I have to reflect on the tools that were of huge benefit in the process. So firstly, I was doing therapy twice a week with an incredible therapist. I was reading your book, or Michael Singer's book, and I was also reading in parallel one of Eckhart Tolle's books, which is, I think, is it The Power of Now, I think is the book.
Yeah.
I read those two books on repeat. I was doing the meditation. I was doing the meditation app, so trying to meditate every day. I was trying to be exercise, so walk or in the gym. So I got into the gym. Say one of the the most significant components of what I'd say is the program was me opening up to my tribe, which predominantly consisted of a few close male friends, and also I also had one in particular female friend who has been in my life for many, many years. So my tribe, I think, was extremely supportive and loving and really held space for me. And not only that, once I introduced all the, the drama and the complexities of what was going on in my life, what ended up happening was they opened up with the traumas and the challenges that they've had or were having in their lives, and our relationship, in particular that one-on-one deep emotional relationship that I had with these individuals grew exponentially. Like, I think our relationship grew exponentially because of what I had experienced and me opening up to you. I mean, I think you were checking in with me almost on a daily basis. And sometimes those calls would go for significant amounts of time. So I'm forever grateful for that. But I want to say that it was those kind of acts of kindness that were, I guess, paramount to, my ability to start again, reset, rebuild, and look at the whole experience as a gift and as a rebirth of some description. And so I wanted to say thank you from the bottom of my heart for being there for me and for showing me the love and care that you did, because I truly felt it. I felt like you were, I felt like not only were you for me, but I really felt that you were with me, and I felt like you were with me on the journey. Like, if I have to go back and think about how I was in those first 6 months of 2022, I don't think I was able to smile. I'd be in the room with my kids and just seeing them playing, and I couldn't even smile on the inside. It took a long time to be able to just smile again. And I don't think people realize, what that is like until you can't. So we take a lot of things for granted in life for what is, and only realize how valuable and special some of these things are when they're gone. And, we're always talking about gratitude and being grateful and great, but like, I cannot instill, in people enough, what it means to really be truly grateful for the very simple things in life, which people just take for as the default, or, as the norm. And they can just be easily taken away from you in a moment. So yeah. So I just want to say thank you. And, you've been a great friend, still from since we've met, but like up until this day. And I just want to say thank you, and thank you for coming on the show, and thank you for, doing this, deep, analysis or reflection on that period. I can easily talk about it, which is a very good sign. So I don't hang on to it. I actually never really ever think about it. It made me become much more present, simply because when you stop thinking about the past or even the future, basically your brain real estate
opens up.
Just has the present to think about. And so you have so much more capacity for the present. So there's been a lot of very, very positive outcomes that have come out from the experience, including having, deeper relationships with Deep Steve. Before we finish, at the end of every show, I like to ask my guests a series of 5 questions. So I'm going to ask you those questions. You can answer in any way you like. It's really just quick fire responses. So if I was to ask you, who would you like to say sorry to, given the chance? Who would that be?
I'd have to say sorry to myself.
I like that. I like that.
It was just way too harsh.
You're too harsh.
Way too
You were too harsh on yourself.
Yeah, the response for when kindness and caring was needed, there was no capacity for that. There was like just a harsh approach, like a very
Just self.
no correct. There was no room for for falling. There was no time for it, and there was no understanding of it, and just a very judgmental, cold place.
What are you proud of being or doing in your life?
By far, my greatest achievement, the thing I'm the most proud of, are my 2 children.
Nice, a fatherhood. When did you receive kindness while needing it most? And when did you receive kindness?
The most kindness that I've ever received in my life came from you and Clinton in a difficult time that I had, and it came out in abundance of love and warmth, but just like a complete. I was enveloped in caring and kindness when it felt like the last thing that I wanted around me, and it was quite profound in terms of it's there all the time and just not being interested in anything else but the best for me.
What did your mother or father teach you that you frequently remind yourself of?
I think the thing from my childhood that I remember the most in terms of my mother and my father was the profound caring and empathy for others, and always being aware of what was happening for others and connected to what others were experiencing, and doing the things that were needed to be supportive of friends and family and love people you love.
And finally, what is Deep Steve's superpower besides being deep?
Well, it comes in the name, right? I used to look at it as a very negative, and then I used to be ashamed and afraid of. I didn't like the fact that I was so sensitive, and then I had the sensitivity, and that I could cry at the drop of a hat. I always thought that as a weakness. And I was at a conference, and someone came and put their hand on my shoulder and said, "My friend, that sensitivity and that crying that you're feeling ashamed of is a superpower, because the moment that emotional, it's a clearing. Once that crying stops, you are powerful, very powerful in the next moment. So powerful that you can be in the room to solve, major problems for people because you're clear, and rather don't run away from it. Come towards the light and come towards that feeling and engage and feel good about that sensitivity." And I think that was a game changer for me. Seeing that as a superpower and being able to care for and love those that you care about I now see it as something that I wouldn't want to ever live without.
Very cool. Deep Steve, thank you. Appreciate your time.
Namaste.
And we will talk on the other side.
That's it for this episode of Men's Anonymous. Thank you for listening. For more information on the Men's Anonymous podcast, including resources discussed in the show, visit mensanonymous.com. Join us next time as host Daniel Weinberg provides a non-judgmental space for men to voice their innermost feelings and thoughts.